The night everything changed began with crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows across marble floors. New York's elite gathered at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel for the most exclusive charity gala of the year, their laughter echoing off gilded walls while champagne bubbled in glasses worth more than most monthly salaries. Stella Reeves smoothed her black server's uniform for the 100th time, her hands trembling as she balanced a silver tray of champagne flutes. At 24, she had mastered the art of invisibility among people who could purchase her entire neighborhood without checking their bank accounts. Tonight felt different, though. The gnawing anxiety in her stomach had nothing to do with the intimidating crowd surrounding her. Her phone buzzed against her hip. Another hospital bill. Another reminder that her 15-year-old sister Emma needed surgery they couldn't afford. No matter how many jobs Stella worked or how many double shifts she picked up at the diner, the ballroom hummed with conversations about stock portfolios. In vacation homes, fragments drifting past as Stella wove between designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Some guests discussed mysterious signals detected from deep space. Others debated humanity's place in the universe with the casual confidence of people who believed they controlled their own world. Near the center of the room, a crowd had gathered. Around a tall man with dark hair and piercing green eyes, Stella recognized him immediately from magazine covers and financial news reports. Damian Cross, 31 years old, and CEO of Cross Industries, the company that had revolutionized space technology and made billions in the process. The signals are definitely artificial. Damian was explaining to his fascinated audience, his voice carrying easily across the space. My team has been analyzing them for months. We're not alone, and whoever is out there is trying to communicate. A woman in a glittering silver dress laughed nervously. Surely you don't believe in little green men, Mr. Cross. Damian's expression remained serious. I believe in data, and the data says we need to be prepared for contact. Stella tried to move past the group, but the crowd had thickened around the billionaire like metal filings drawn to a magnet. She found herself trapped between a large man in a navy suit and a woman whose perfume made her eyes water. The champagne glasses on her tray clinked together as she tried to navigate the tight space. That's when she saw him. Another server, carrying a massive ice sculpture, moving directly toward Damian's group. The man looked nervous, sweating despite the perfect air conditioning, his hands shaking as he struggled with his burden. Something was very wrong. Stella watched in slow motion as the server stumbled. The ice sculpture flew from his hands, arcing through the air straight toward Damian Cross. There was no time for anyone else to react, no time for security or quick reflexes. Without thinking, Stella lunged forward. Her tray of champagne glasses went flying as she collided with both the falling sculpture and the unsuspecting billionaire. Glass shattered like stars exploding. Champagne sprayed across expensive clothing. And she found herself tangled with Damian Cross on the cold marble floor, covered in ice water and surrounded by complete chaos. The ballroom fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the spectacle at the center of the room. Stella felt her face burn with mortification as she realized she was sprawled across one of the most powerful men in the world. Her uniform soaked and her dignity scattered like the broken glass around them. Damian's green eyes stared up at her, wide with surprise, but not anger. His strong arms had instinctively wrapped around her when they fell, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest, could smell his expensive cologne mixed with champagne and melting ice. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, trying to untangle herself from his embrace. "I was trying to stop the sculpture from hitting you, and I just made everything worse." Damian sat up slowly, his expensive tuxedo dripping with champagne and ice water. He should have been furious, should have been calling for security to have her arrested. Instead, he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Something that made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, his voice cutting through the murmur of the shocked crowd. "Stella Reeves," she replied, accepting his offered hand as he helped her to her feet. "I work for the catering company. I'll pay for the damage. I promise. I know I can't afford it, but I'll find a way." Damian studied her face for a long moment, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Something that had everything to do with the way he was looking at her. like she was the most interesting person in the room full of millionaires and celebrities. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damian said suddenly, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom as he stood, "I have an announcement to make." Stella tried to step back, to fade into the crowd of onlookers, but Damian caught her hand and held it gently but firmly. His touch sent an electric shock through her entire body, and she found herself frozen in place as every eye in the ballroom focused on them. "As many of you know," Damian continued, his voice steady and commanding, "my company has been in communication with extraterrestrial intelligence for several months now." The crowd gasped collectively. Stella felt dizzy. Aliens. First contact? This had to be some kind of elaborate joke, a publicity stunt gone wrong. Damian raised his free hand for silence. "What you don't know is that they've agreed to formal negotiations. The first contact is happening whether we're ready or not." Yeah. Ballroom erupted in whispers and exclamations. Camera phones appeared from evening purses, and Stella realized with growing horror that reporters had been disguised among the guests. Flashbulbs began firing like paparazzi lightning, but Damian's eyes never left her face. "The alien delegation has very specific cultural requirements for these negotiations," continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "They value family structures and committed partnerships above all else. They will only negotiate with leaders who can demonstrate long-term emotional bonds." Stella's heart was beating so hard she was certain everyone could hear it over the crowd noise. Where was this going? What did any of this have to do with her? "I need a wife," Damian announced, his words clear and steady despite the pandemonium around them. "Not for love, not for tradition, but for the future of humanity. The negotiations begin in 6 months, and I need someone who can stand beside me as we determine Earth's place in the galactic community." The crowd was in complete chaos now, everyone talking at once, phones recording, reporters shouting questions. But somehow Damian's voice carried over all of it as he looked directly into Stella's stunned eyes. "I'm offering a contract," he said. 6 months, as my wife, with full compensation for your time and discretion. At the end of 6 months, we part ways with no obligations, no strings attached." Stella felt like she was floating outside her own body. This couldn't be happening. People didn't make offers like this to struggling servers who crashed into them at charity galas. This was the stuff of fantasy novels and daytime television, not real life. "Mr. Cross," a reporter shouted over the noise, "are you seriously proposing marriage to a complete stranger?" Damian smiled, and for the first time that evening, it reached his eyes. "I'm proposing marriage to the only person in this room brave enough to throw herself into harm's way to protect someone else. That's exactly the kind of partner humanity needs right now." Stella opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, everyone straining to hear her response. She thought about Emma in her hospital bed, about the bills that kept coming no matter how hard she worked, about the 3 jobs that still weren't enough to cover the mounting medical debt. But she also thought about the way Damian was looking at her. It's like she was someone worth believing in, someone who mattered. "I need time to think," she managed to say, her voice barely audible over the crowd. Damian nodded and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out an elegant business card. "Call me tomorrow. But Stella, I want you to know this isn't charity. I've made billions by recognizing value when I see it. You've something I need, and I'm willing to pay for it." Before she could respond, security guards appeared to escort her away from the chaos. As she was led through the crowd, Stella caught glimpses of faces she recognized from news broadcasts and social media. Some looked shocked, others intrigued, and a few seemed genuinely afraid. Near the edge of the ballroom, she noticed a woman with silver hair and unusually pale blue eyes, watching everything with intense interest. The woman was beautiful in an otherworldly way, and when their eyes met, Stella felt a chill run down her spine. There was something not quite human about her smile, something that made Stella's skin crawl with primitive warning. But before she could think about it further, she was outside in the cool night air, holding Damian Cross's business card and trying to process what had just happened. Her hands were shaking as she looked down at the elegant cardstock with its simple black lettering. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the hospital about Emma's treatment schedule. Stella stared at the card in her hands. Whatever game Damian Cross was playing, whatever these supposed aliens wanted, this might be her only chance to save her sister. She had 12 hours to decide whether to change her life forever, whether to accept a proposal that sounded like science fiction, but might be the answer to her prayers, the choice that could save everything she cared about, or destroy the only life she'd ever known. The next morning, Stella sat in her tiny apartment kitchen, staring at Damian's business card while nursing her third cup of coffee. She hadn't slept. The answer to some question she didn't understand. Her phone rang. The hospital. Miss Reeves. This is Dr. Martinez. I need to discuss Emma's treatment options with you as soon as possible. Stella's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Is she okay? She's stable, but we need to move forward with the surgery within the next month, or we'll lose the window of opportunity. I understand you've been working on the financial arrangements. Financial arrangements. That was a polite way of saying Stella had been begging for payment extensions and researching. Medical loans she'd never qualify for. I'm working on it, she said, her voice barely steady. Miss Reeves, I need to be direct with you. Without this surgery, Emma's condition will continue to deteriorate. We're talking about her quality of life, possibly even her life expectancy. After hanging up, Stella held Damian's card in trembling fingers. 6 months of her life for enough money to save Emma. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. But what if it wasn't? She dialed the number. Damian Cross's office. This is Sarah. This is Stella Reeves. Mr. Cross asked me to call. Oh, yes. Miss Reeves. Mr. Cross is expecting your call. Please hold. The wait stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then his voice came through the line, rich and warm and somehow more real than everything that had happened the night before. Stella, I wasn't sure you'd call. Wasn't sure either, she admitted. But I need to know if you were serious. About all of it. Completely serious. Can you meet me for lunch? I think we should discuss this properly, away from cameras and crowds. 2 hours later, Stella found herself in an elegant restaurant she'd never even dreamed of entering. Damian was already waiting in a private dining room, and seeing him in daylight made her realize how attractive he really was. The formal tuxedo had been replaced by a perfectly fitted dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and made his green eyes even more striking. Thank you for coming, he said, standing as she entered. His manners were impeccable, but there was something in his expression that seemed genuinely nervous. Before we talk about anything else, Stella said, settling into the chair he pulled out for her. I need to know if you're completely insane or if this alien thing is real. Damian laughed, and the sound transformed his entire face. Direct. I like that. He pulled out a tablet and showed her a series of complex waveforms and data analyzes. These are the signals we've been receiving, not random cosmic noise. They're structured, mathematical, intentional. Stella studied the data, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. You really believe this is from another planet? I don't believe it. I know it. My team has been in communication with them. For 8 months, they call themselves the Valdris, and they're not what we expected. They're not here to invade or to study us like specimens. They want to establish trade relationships, share technology, but only with species they consider civilized. And civilized means married. Civilized means stable family units, committed partnerships, emotional maturity. The Valdris have been observing human society. They're concerned about our individualistic tendencies, our high divorce rates, our casual approach to relationships. They see it as evidence that we're not ready for the responsibilities that come with advanced technology. Stella felt a laugh building in her chest, part hysteria and part disbelief. So you need a wife to prove to aliens that humans can commit? 2 things. I need a wife to secure humanity's future, Damian said, his expression completely serious. The technologies they're offering could solve climate change, end hunger, revolutionize medicine. But if we fail to meet their cultural requirements, they'll move on to the next species, and we'll lose this opportunity forever. Why me? The question had been burning in her mind since the night before. You're Damian Cross. You could have any woman in the world. Any woman in the world would want something from me afterward. Money, connections, fame. You're the only person I've met who risked herself for a stranger without expecting anything in return. That kind of character is exactly what the Valdres are looking for." Stella stared at him across the elegant table, trying to process everything he was telling her. What exactly would this contract involve? You'd move into my penthouse immediately. We'd need to be seen together regularly, attend social functions, convince the world and the Valdres that our relationship is genuine. The wedding would be in 3 weeks, and the Valdres delegation arrives in 5 months. And after 6 months, we get divorced quietly. You receive $5 million, and you're free to live whatever life you choose. $5 million. Enough to pay for Emma's surgery, her recovery, her college education, and still have enough left over to secure both their futures forever. "There's something else," Damian said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. "The woman you saw at the gala last night, the one with silver hair, she's one of them. The Valdres advanced scout, here to observe and report back to the delegation. Everything we do will be watched, analyzed, judged." Stella's blood ran cold as she remembered those unsettling pale blue eyes and that too-perfect smile. She looked human. "They're remarkably similar to us, physically, but they can sense deception in ways we don't understand. If we're going to do this, we have to make them believe our marriage is real. Completely real." The weight of what he was asking settled over her like a heavy blanket. "You want me to lie to aliens who can detect lies?" "I want you to help me save the world," Damian said simply. "And I want to help you save your sister." Stella closed her eyes, thinking of Emma's pale face in the hospital bed, of the bills piling up on her kitchen table, of the 3 jobs that would never be enough. When she opened them again, Damian was watching her with an expression that was equal parts hope and desperation. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "what happens to me? What happens to who I am?" "You become someone who saved the human race," Damian replied. "And Emma gets the surgery she needs." Stella took a deep breath and made the choice that would change everything. "Okay," she said, "I'll marry you." 3 weeks later, Stella stood in a silk wedding dress that cost more than she'd earned in the past year, staring at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of Damian's penthouse. The Manhattan skyline stretched below them, glittering. In the afternoon sun, like scattered diamonds, the ceremony had been small but elegant. Attended by carefully selected witnesses and the mysterious Valdres scout who had introduced herself as Lyrian. Everything had gone perfectly according to plan, but Stella felt like she was living someone else's life. "Second thoughts?" Damian's voice came from behind her, warm and concerned. She turned to find him watching her with those piercing green eyes, still wearing his wedding tuxedo. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, the space between them had become charged with something neither of them had expected. What started as a business arrangement had evolved into something more complicated, more dangerous. "No second thoughts about?" "Emma," she said. "The surgery went perfectly, and she's recovering better than anyone hoped. But this," she gestured between them, "this is getting complicated." Damian moved closer, and she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "I know. I didn't expect to actually care about you." The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to explore. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of public appearances, intimate dinners, and moments when the line between pretense and reality had blurred beyond recognition. "We need to be careful," Stella said, though her body was betraying her words by leaning toward him. "Lyrian is always watching. If she suspects this isn't real, ... What if it is real?" Damian asked, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "What? If somewhere in all this pretending, we stopped pretending?" Before she could answer, his lips were on hers, and the kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks they'd shared for the cameras. This was desperate and hungry, and full of all the feelings they'd been trying to ignore. Stella melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her carefully constructed walls crumbling when they broke apart. Both breathing hard, Stella saw something in Damian's eyes that terrified her. Not because it was fake, but because it was utterly, completely real. "This changes everything," she whispered. No, Damian said firmly. This changes nothing. The contract still stands. 6 months? Then you're free to choose whatever life you want? But even as he said it, they both knew he was lying. The next morning brought news that shattered their carefully constructed world. Stella woke to find Damian in his study, staring at multiple computer screens showing news feeds from around the globe. What's wrong? She asked, wrapping her silk robe tighter around herself. The signals have stopped, Damian said, his voice hollow. All communication with the Valdris delegation has been cut off. They're not responding to any of our attempts to make contact. Stella felt ice form in her stomach. What does that mean? It means something's gone wrong. Either they've decided we're not worth their time, or... He trailed off, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Or what? Or there's another faction. Not all the Valdris agreed with the peaceful contact approach. Some of them wanted to simply take what they needed from Earth without negotiation. Before Stella could respond, every screen in the penthouse went black simultaneously. Then, slowly, text began appearing in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Symbols that somehow translated themselves in their minds. Deception detected. Contract null. Assessment complete. The screens went dark again, leaving them in silence that felt heavy with impending doom. They know, Stella said, her voice barely a whisper.
Ugh, somehow they know this isn't real.
Damian was already moving, grabbing phones and tablets, his fingers flying over keyboards. I need to contact my team. Need to establish communication. Need to explain ... Damian. Stop. Stella caught his hands, forcing him to look at her. If we've been thinking about this all wrong, what do you mean? What if the deception they detected wasn't about our marriage being fake? What if it was about our marriage being real? Damian stared at her, his brilliant mind working through the implications. I think they know we've actually fallen for each other. I think they know we started this as a lie, and it became truth. And maybe to a species that values honesty above all else. That's even worse than a simple deception. The penthouse shuddered around them and through the windows. They could see lights in the sky that definitely weren't airplanes. Ships, sleek and beautiful and utterly alien, descending through the clouds toward the city. They're not here to negotiate anymore, Damian said, watching the ships with a mixture of awe and terror. They're here to judge. Stella moved to stand beside him at the window, and without thinking, he took her hand. Their fingers interlaced perfectly, as if they'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. Then we face judgment together, she said. As husband and wife. For real this time. Damian squeezed her hand tighter. Stella, I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, these past 3 weeks have been the most real thing in my entire life. Mine too, she admitted, and realized she meant it completely. Outside. The alien ships were landing in Central Park, and the world was about to change forever. But inside the penthouse, 2 people who had found unexpected love in the middle of an impossible situation stood together, ready to face whatever came next. The real test was just beginning. The Valdris Tribunal convened at dawn in Central Park, the crystalline ships forming a perfect circle around the great lawn. Stella and Damian stood in the center, hands clasped, facing 3 beings whose beauty was so ethereal it was almost painful to look at directly. Lyrian stood among them, no longer bothering to maintain her human disguise. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, and her pale blue eyes held depths that spoke of ancient wisdom and terrible judgment. Damian Cross of Earth, the center figure, spoke, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. You initiated contact under false pretenses. You offered a deception as proof of your species' worthiness. Yes, Damian said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hand. I did. Stella felt her heart stop. She had expected him to argue, to explain, to fight for humanity's future. Instead, he was confessing. But Damian continued, what began as deception became truth. What started as necessity became choice. This woman agreed to a contract, but somewhere in the process, we both chose something greater. The tribunal. Members exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes in seconds. You claim transformation from falsehood to authenticity, Lyrian said, stepping forward. Prove it? How? Stella asked, finding her voice. Show us the moment deception died and truth was born. Suddenly, the air around them shimmered, and Stella gasped as images began forming in the space between them and the tribunal. Pulled from both their minds simultaneously, playing out like holograms for all to see. She watched herself crash into Damian at the gala, saw the moment of connection in his eyes. She saw their first lunch, the careful negotiations, the signatures on contracts, but then the memories shifted, showing moments she hadn't realized were significant. Damian bringing her coffee, exactly how she liked it, without being asked. The way his face lit up when she laughed at his terrible jokes. The night she fell asleep on his couch while they watched old movies, and he carried her to bed without waking her, then slept in the guest room to preserve her reputation. The memories came faster now. Stella teaching Damian to cook scrambled eggs in his $1 million kitchen. Damian holding her while she cried after visiting Emma in the hospital. The moment during their third week together when she looked at him across the breakfast table and realized she was no longer pretending to care about him. The wedding ceremony appeared in the shimmer, and Stella watched herself say, "I do," and saw the exact second when the words stopped being part of a performance and became a promise. She meant with every fiber of her being. Finally, the images showed the kiss from the night before, and even in holographic form, it radiated such genuine emotion that the air itself seemed to warm around them. When the memories faded, the tribunal stood in silence for long moments. Fascinating, the center figure said finally. In your attempt to deceive us, you accidentally discovered something your species rarely achieves: authentic transformation. What does that mean for us? Stella asked, her voice barely audible. For humanity? Lyrian smiled, and for the first time, the expression looked genuinely warm instead of terrifying. It means you have shown us something unexpected. Your species can evolve, can grow beyond your limitations when properly motivated. You have proven that humans are capable of becoming more than the sum of your individual desires. The figure to the left spoke for the first time. However, your methods remain questionable. You still began with deception. Stella felt despair rising in her chest, but Damian squeezed her hand tighter. Yes, we did, he said. And if I had to do it again, I would make the same choice. Because sometimes the only way to find truth is to start with the courage to risk everything on a lie that might become real. The tribunal members looked at each other again, and this time their silent communication lasted several minutes. Finally, the center figure turned back to them. We will offer humanity a modified agreement. Not the full technological exchange we originally proposed, but a gradual introduction. You will have opportunities to prove your species' growth over time, and you two will serve as our primary contacts and cultural ambassadors. For how long? Stella asked. For as long as your bond remains authentic, Lyrian said. Should your marriage fail, should you return to deception, the agreement ends immediately. Stella looked at Damian, seeing her own emotions reflected in his eyes. They had started this as a 6-month contract with a guaranteed exit strategy. Now, they were being asked to commit to each other and to humanity's future for as long as their love lasted. No pressure, Damian said with a wry smile, and despite everything, Stella laughed. I can think of worse fates than being stuck with you forever, she said. Is that a yes? The tribunal asked in unison. Lel looked around at the impossible scene surrounding them. Alien ships in Central Park, beings of incredible beauty offering humanity a chance at the stars, and the man she had accidentally fallen in love with holding her hand like she was the most precious thing in any world. Yes, she said firmly. It's a yes. The tribunal nodded in approval, and the ships began to dissolve into points of light that scattered across the morning sky like fallen stars returning home. We will return in 1 year, Lyrian said as she began to fade. Be ready. As the last of the alien presence vanished, Stella and Damian found themselves alone in Central Park with the rising sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, they could hear sirens and news helicopters, the world awakening. To the reality of first contact, Well, Damian said, turning to face her fully. Mrs. Cross, any regrets about getting into this mess? Stella thought about Emma, healthy and laughing in her hospital bed. She thought about the impossible love story she had stumbled into, about the responsibility they now carried for humanity's future, about the amazing and terrifying adventure that lay ahead of them. Ask me again in 50 years, she said, and kissed him as the sun rose on a new world, one where love could literally move the stars. The Ian Deal liked this video if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.